The obsidian chamber breathed with the weight of ages, its walls seamless and vast, absorbing the faint luminescence that bled from the crystalline spire at its heart. Here, within the sanctum of the G-Vorn hegemony, silence was a currency more valuable than worlds, and for generations it had been spent with parsimonious care. Tonight, however, it was a frayed and brittle thing. The assembled consciousnesses of the conclave resonated with a discordant hum of anxiety and contempt, a psychic friction that caused the very air to feel thin and sharp. At the center of this silent storm was the holographic projection of a world they called Earth, a vibrant jewel of blue and white hanging in the simulated void, oblivious to the judgment being passed upon it. High Counselor Thrax, his physical form a towering edifice of ancient chitin and patiently grown crystalline armor, let his multifaceted eyes drift over the assembled delegates. He saw the nervous twitch in the ethereal tendrils of the Lumini envoys, the rigid, arrogant stillness of the hulking Xylos warlords, and the cold, calculating shimmer of the cybernetic Sill. They were all united under his authority, a grand coalition of species whose combined might had carved an empire from the stars, yet they were disquieted by a race of soft-bodied, ephemeral beings who had barely learned to walk beyond their own solar system. It was an absurdity that bordered on insult. They continue to push, Warlord Kor's voice boomed, not through the air, but directly into the minds of all present, a telepathic battering ram of impatience. His projected avatar, a monolith of scaled flesh and brutal purpose, gestured dismissively at the shimmering image of a human vessel. Their ships are abominations of primitive design. They spew fire and hurl solid matter. They are loud, inefficient, and an affront to the elegance of reasoned galactic expansion. A softer, more melodic thought stream coiled through the conclave, emanating from the Lumini matriarch. Yet their expansion is relentless, Warlord. They do not conquer, yet they claim territory. They do not subjugate, yet worlds fall under their influence. They arrive, they build. They establish these colonies and then simply exist. And their presence changes the systems they inhabit. Other nascent species in their path cease their petty squabbles. Predatory fauna are relocated. Ecological disasters are averted. It is this passive aggression, this infuriating benevolence, that we find so unsettling. Thrax allowed the debate to flow, his own thoughts a deep, slow river beneath the rapids of the others. He had studied the humans for longer than any of them. He had watched their first clumsy steps into space, monitored their chaotic internal communications, and analyzed the strange, contradictory philosophies that seemed to govern them. The Xylos saw only primitive warriors, ripe for conquest. The Lumini saw a cultural enigma, a potential psychic contaminant. The Sill, in their cold logic, saw only an inefficient biological variable that needed to be contained or purged before it could disrupt the calculated order of the galaxy. They all saw a piece of the truth, but none of them grasped the whole. The human ship in the hologram was a perfect example of their paradox. By hegemony standards, it was a relic. Its lines were brutally functional, lacking any of the aesthetic grace that even the most martial Xylos vessel possessed. Its energy signature was a chaotic roar of contained fusion and exotic particle reactions, a stark contrast to the silent, gravitational displacement drives of the hegemony fleet. The Sill had analyzed its projected weapon emplacements, reporting that they were primarily kinetic accelerators and directed energy cannons, weapons that relied on overwhelming thermal energy or brute force impact. Against the phase-shifted, multi-layered energy shields of a hegemony battlecruiser, such weapons were as primitive and useless as throwing stones at a mountain. This was the source of the Xylos' arrogance and the foundation of the Conclave's perceived superiority. They believed they had the ultimate upper hand, a technological advantage so absolute that it rendered the humans little more than a bothersome, if prolific, pest. Their technology is a dead end, a Sill representative's synthesized voice stated, cutting through the psychic chatter with sterile precision. The Sill did not use telepathy, deeming it an imprecise and emotionally compromised form of communication. They have focused on the mastery of crude energy release. Our own defensive systems operate on principles of reality manipulation. We do not block energy, we displace it into a pocket dimension. We do not brace for impact, we warp the spacetime continuum around our hulls to divert it. A human warship could expend its entire energy reserve attacking one of our destroyers and would achieve nothing but a brief, localized light show. The threat they pose. E is not military, but demographic. They reproduce and expand at a rate that is statistically alarming. They must be contained. Contained, they should be eradicated. Warlord Core's thought projections slammed a virtual fist onto the central dais. They are an infection. They have breached the Delphic expanse, a region declared fallow by this very conclave. They ignore our demarcations, our warnings. Their latest vessel, the one they call the Indomitable, sits at the edge of the Viridian Nebula, a place of sacred, scientific importance to the Lumini. It is a deliberate provocation. The Lumini matriarch's presence pulsed with a soft, sorrowful light. The warlord is correct in his assessment of the location, though his proposed solution lacks finesse. The Viridian Nebula is a cradle of nascent life. The energies within are delicate. A battle fought with the crude weapons of the humans, or even the decisive power of the Xylos, would cause irreparable harm to the gestating ecosystems within. We have sent them messages, imploring them to withdraw. They have responded with politeness. They acknowledge our claim, but respectfully refuse to move, stating their mission is one of observation. Thrax finally stirred, his ancient mind focusing into a single point of authority that silenced the chamber. The psychic hum ceased, the avatar stilled, and all attention fell upon the High Counselor. Observation, Thrax repeated, his own thoughts resonating with the texture of grinding stone. It is a word they use often. We have observed them for the entirety of their brief existence as a spacefaring species. We have watched them fight amongst themselves with a ferocity that is both horrifying and fascinating. We have seen them poison their own world, and then, with that same ferocity, claw it back from the brink of oblivion. And now, they turn their gaze outward, and they observe. He manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on the human ship. It was a stark, angular design, a blade of dark metal against the swirling emerald and sapphire clouds of the nebula. It was alone. This, more than anything, troubled Thrax. The hegemony never sent a single vessel into contested territory, especially not a vessel that was, by all metrics, hopelessly outmatched. It was either an act of supreme arrogance or supreme confidence. With humans, the line between the two was often impossible to discern. You believe our shields make us invulnerable, Thrax continued, his gaze sweeping across the delegates. The Sill's analysis is correct. On paper, our advantage is absolute, but we have operated on a single, core assumption, that the humans intend to fight us on our own terms, that their goal is to destroy our ships, to wage a war of attrition and conquest as the Xylos would. I am no longer certain this assumption is valid. The chamber remained silent, but a new wave of uncertainty rippled through the conclave. Thrax's wisdom was the bedrock of the hegemony. To hear him question their most fundamental strategic assessment was like feeling the ground shift beneath their feet. They have been broadcasting a message, Thrax said, on a continuous, open channel directed at the hegemony fleet we have positioned at the nebula's edge. The Sill have decrypted its rudimentary encoding. He gestured, and a new element appeared in the chamber. A stream of human language, translated into the sterile text of the Sill and the complex emotional glyphs of the Lumini. The message was simple, and in its simplicity, deeply unsettling. It was not a threat nor a plea. It was an invitation. We have come to observe a celestial phenomenon of profound significance, the translation read. Our presence is not intended as a hostile act. We recognize your territorial claim and the sacred nature of this region to the Lumini people. However, our mission is of vital importance. We invite you to observe with us. We ask only that you do not approach within a designated perimeter. Any attempt to cross this perimeter will be interpreted as a hostile act, and we will respond accordingly to ensure the safety of our vessel and the integrity of our mission. Warlord Core's avatar trembled with barely contained rage. Respond? How dare they? A single, primitive cruiser threatening an entire hegemony battle fleet? It is an insult to everything we are. High Counselor, I demand you sanction my fleet to advance. Let us cross this perimeter and see what their pathetic response is. Let us swat this fly from our skies and teach this upstart race the meaning of humility. The Lumini matriarch pulsed with alarm. No, Warlord, the risk to the nebula is too great. Their weapons, while useless against your shields, could still unleash catastrophic energies into the surrounding space. We must find a diplomatic solution. Diplomacy with ants, Kor sneered. They do not deserve a place at the table of galactic powers. Thrax listened, his ancient mind sifting through the proverb. Illities, the variables, the endless contradictions of the human species. Arrogance, benevolence, politeness, threats, a lone ship against a fleet, an invitation to watch the stars, coupled with a line drawn in the void. They were a puzzle box wrapped in an enigma, and he feared that the tools the hegemony possessed, overwhelming force, ancient tradition, and cold logic, were insufficient to unlock it. The warlord's impatience is noted, Thrax said, his tone leaving no room for argument. However, his demand is denied. We will not be baited into a rash action by a species that has consistently demonstrated a capacity for the unexpected. You speak of their primitive technology, yet you ignore the one area where they have demonstrably surpassed us, the art of the unknown. They are masters of psychological warfare, even if they are not aware of it themselves. Their unpredictability is their greatest weapon, and we have yet to develop a shield against it. He focused the hologram once more on the lone human ship, the Indomitable. It floated there, silent and still, a dark sentinel at the edge of a celestial wonder. It looked small and insignificant against the grandeur of the cosmos. Yet, in that moment, to High Counselor Thrax, it felt like the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. "We will not attack," he declared, his voice a final, unshakable judgment. "We will not retreat. We will do as they have invited us to do. We will hold our position. We will raise our shields. And we will observe. Let the humans make their move. Let them show us what response they have prepared. We have the upper hand in technology, in numbers, in power. Let us see if that is enough." A tense, grudging acceptance settled over the conclave. The warlords seethed in silence, the diplomats shimmered with unease, and the logicians calculated new variables. In the heart of the obsidian chamber, the image of the human ship remained, a silent testament to a conflict that had not yet begun, but one that would be fought not with weapons of fire and steel, but with belief, perception, and the terrifying weight of the unknown. The hegemony was about to learn that the upper hand is a fragile thing, and that some wars are lost in the moments just before the first shot is fired. The bridge of the hegemony flagship, Vigilance, was a symphony of silent, controlled power. Unlike the chaotic, screen-filled command centers of human vessels, the Vigilance's heart was a vast, open space. The crew, members of a species bred for centuries for perfect synaptic interface, were seated in gracefully curved pods, their minds directly linked to the ship's systems. Information flowed not as text or images, but as pure, unadulterated data streams, processed with the speed of thought. At the center of this neural network stood Fleet Master Kalen, a Xylos of noble bloodline, his physical form encased in ceremonial battle armor that integrated seamlessly with the ship's command throne. His claws rested on polished obsidian controls, but the real command was exerted by his will alone. Before him, a panoramic view of the Viridian Nebula filled the forward viewport, a breathtaking tapestry of incandescent gas and stellar nurseries. And against that backdrop, hanging in the void like a shard of obsidian, was the human ship, Indomitable. It had not moved. It had not varied its energy output. It had simply waited. For days, Kalen's fleet had held its position, a silent, overwhelming force of hegemony might. A multitude of cruisers, destroyers, and support craft formed a crescent of unassailable power, their phase-shifted shields shimmering with latent energy, their gravitational weaponry primed and ready. And the single human ship had done nothing. The High Counselor's orders had been explicit: hold, observe. Kalen, a warrior to his core, found the order galling. His instincts screamed at him to advance, to crush the insolent human vessel and be done with it. To him, this inaction was a stain on the honor of the Xylos and the authority of the hegemony. Every silent moment felt like a concession, a validation of the humans' baffling arrogance. "Status report," Kalen subvocalized, his command rippling through the ship's consciousness. The response was instantaneous, a cascade of data flowing directly into his mind. Human vessel remains at designated coordinates. No change in energy signature. No weapon ports open. They continue to broadcast their invitation to observe. Our long-range scans of the nebula's core confirm their claim. a rare magnetar pulsation event is imminent. The phenomenon is of significant scientific interest but poses no threat. A magnetar pulsation, a light show. The humans had traveled to the edge of hegemony space, defied a fleet, and risked interstellar war to watch a star pulse. The absurdity of it fueled Kalen's frustration. Were they truly that naive, or was this a deception of a kind his warrior mind could not comprehend? "They mock us," he muttered, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the command throne. "They sit there, protected by nothing but their own audacity, and they mock our power by ignoring it." His second-in-command, a SIL tactician whose consciousness was designated Unit 734, offered a different perspective. Its synthesized thought pattern was a cool, precise counterpoint to Kalen's heat. Alternative hypothesis: they are not ignoring our power, they are rendering it irrelevant to their objective. Their goal is observation. Our goal is territorial security. As long as these two objectives do not directly conflict, a state of equilibrium is maintained. Their strategy is efficient. Kalen's lip curled in a snarl. The SIL's logic was flawless and infuriating. Efficiency is the refuge of the timid, Unit 734. There is no efficiency in honor. There is only victory or defeat. This stalemate is a form of defeat. He stewed in his own resentment, his eyes fixed on the human ship. It was so small, so plain. An ugly, utilitarian block of metal that had somehow managed to paralyze the will of the most powerful empire in the quadrant. It was then that it happened. A new signal, a new broadcast from the Indomitable. It was not a repetition of their previous message. This one was directed, specific, and addressed to him. Fleet Master Kalen of the Hegemony Vessel Vigilance. This is Captain Eva Rostova of the human exploration vessel Indomitable. The primary pulsation event is about to commence. We would consider it a gesture of shared scientific spirit if you would lower your forward energy shields. The resonance interference from your active defenses will partially obscure the subtler neutrino emissions. Our own shields are, of course, already down. The audacity of the request struck Kalen like a physical blow. Lower their shields, in the face of a potential, if unlikely, adversary. It was a violation of every military doctrine, every tactical instinct he possessed. It was a request so profoundly naive, so suicidally trusting, that it could only be one of two things: a pathetic plea from a hopelessly outmatched foe hoping for a crumb of mercy, or a trap of such magnificent subtlety that he could not even begin to fathom its design. "They are either fools or gods," he rumbled, the thought echoing across the bridge. "And I have never met a god who traveled in such a pathetic chariot." Unit 734's analysis flowed into his mind, cool and detached. Analysis of request. Risk is negligible. All weapon signatures on the human vessel remain dormant. Even if they were to fire their crude kinetic weapons, our secondary hull armor is more than sufficient to withstand the impact until the shields could be raised again. The potential intelligence to be gained by observing their reaction to our compliance, however, is significant. It would be a test of their stated intent. Kalen hesitated. The SIL's logic was sound, yet every fiber of his being screamed against it. To lower his shields would be to show vulnerability. But to refuse would be to admit fear. To admit that he, Fleet Master Kalen, at the helm of a fleet that could crack planets, was afraid of a single, silent human ship. The choice was impossible. One path sacrificed pride, the other honor. His decision was made in a torrent of conflicting emotions. He would call their bluff. He would show them the contempt in which he held their supposed threat. He would lower the shields, and he would watch their faces, or whatever passed for them on their chaotic bridges, when they realized that even without its primary defense, a hegemony warship was an unassailable fortress. "Lower the forward shields," Kalen commanded, the order sent with a surge of defiant will. "Divert all power to passive sensors. I want to record every emission, every particle, every flicker of energy from that ship and the nebula. Let us see this phenomenon the humans find so fascinating." A soft chime resonated through the bridge as the great phase-shifted energy field protecting the Vigilance dissolved into nothingness. For the first time in the standoff, the Fleet Master's ship was exposed, its armored prow naked to the void. There was a palpable tension in the minds of the crew, a shared intake of psychic breath. They were all warriors, but this felt different. This was not the honorable prelude to battle. It was a move in a game whose rules they did not understand. On the viewport, the Indomitable remained still. No sudden energy surge, no opening of weapon ports, it just hung there. Then, a new message, brief and simple. "Thank you, Fleet Master. We appreciate your cooperation. The show is about to begin." And it did. The core of the Viridian Nebula began to pulse, a wave of emerald light expanding outwards in a slow, majestic ripple. It was beautiful, Kalen had to admit. A wave of exotic particles, neutrinos, and gravitons washed over his fleet, harmlessly. His sensors, now unimpeded by the shy LD's interference, drank in the data, cataloging a celestial event of stunning complexity. The science divisions of the hegemony would study this for years. He watched, a part of him feeling a grudging respect for the humans' dedication to science, another part feeling the bitter sting of anticlimax. So this was it. This was the great mystery. They were just scientists. Eccentric, annoyingly persistent scientists. He had allowed himself to be worked into a frenzy of suspicion and paranoia over a group of cosmic sightseers. The thought was deflating. The pulsation wave passed, and the nebula began to settle back into its shimmering equilibrium. The show was over. Kalen felt a wave of irritation. He had been played, not through malice, but through a bizarre form of galactic innocence. He had lowered his shields for nothing. "Raise the shields," he began to command, the words forming in his mind. But they never came. Before he could issue the order, something happened. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was silent, subtle, and more terrifying than any explosion he had ever witnessed. A single, impossibly thin beam of pure white light, no thicker than a thread, lanced out from the bow of the Indomitable. It was not a laser. It carried no thermal energy. It was not a particle beam. It had no mass. The sensors screamed, not with warnings of damage, but with paradoxes. The beam was not traveling through space. It was canceling it. It was a line of absolute nullity, a surgical incision in the fabric of reality itself. It moved with a speed that was not a velocity but an inevitability. It did not cross the distance to his fleet, it was simply there. It touched the flagship of Warlord Corps' squadron, a vessel even larger than the Vigilance. The beam did not impact the hull. It did not burn or penetrate. It simply touched the ship's shield generator, which was still operating at full power. And the shield vanished. There was no explosion, no flicker. One moment, the Xylos battlecruiser was encased in a shimmering cocoon of displaced reality. The next, it was gone. The ship itself was unharmed, but its primary defense, the very technology that formed the bedrock of hegemony military doctrine, had been utterly and silently erased from existence. The beam, having done its work, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The entire event had lasted less than a second. A profound, absolute silence descended upon the bridge of the Vigilance. The minds of the crew were locked in a state of cognitive dissonance, their brains unable to process the data their senses were screaming at them. A shield generator could not just cease to be. It could be overloaded, damaged, destroyed. But it could not be unmade. Kalen stared, his warrior's mind, which had processed countless battle scenarios, now a complete and utter blank. He looked at Warlord Corps' ship, now naked and vulnerable in the void. He looked at the readings from his own sensors, which were still reporting impossible physics, violations of the fundamental laws of causality and conservation of energy. He looked at the small, dark human ship, the Indomitable. And then a final message came through, its translated text appearing in the silent space before him. It was not triumphant. It was not arrogant. It was calm, professional, and utterly chilling. "This has been a demonstration. We have not fired a weapon. We have performed a targeted, localized ontological recalibration. The effect is temporary. Your vessel's shield generator will rematerialize in precisely 1 hour. We trust our point has been made. The perimeter must be respected. We will now resume our observations. Rostova out." Ontological recalibration. The words meant nothing and everything. They had not destroyed the shield. They had, for a brief moment, convinced reality that it had never existed in the first place. Kalen slowly sank back into his command throne, a coldness spreading through his veins that had nothing to do with the temperature of the bridge, the upper hand, the absolute, unassailable advantage. It had been an illusion. They had brought stone knives to a war of ideas, and their opponents had just rewritten the laws of physics as a warning shot. The humans were not primitive. They were not naive. They were something else entirely. And for the first time in his long, decorated career, Fleet Master Kalen felt a tremor of true, unadulterated fear. The warship had fired, but it had not been a declaration of war. It had been the universe's quietest, most terrifying sermon. The obsidian chamber of the G-Vorn hegemony was no longer a place of arrogant debate. The silence that now filled it was not the calm of authority, but the stunned, hollow silence of shattered dogma. The delegates of the conclave were assembled once more, their avatars and psychic presences radiating a uniform frequency of disbelief and a profound, existential dread that transcended species. In the center of the chamber, the holographic display replayed the event at the Viridian Nebula on a continuous loop. The impossibly thin beam of white light, the instantaneous and silent disappearance of the Xylos battlecruiser's shield, and the calm, terrifyingly simple message that had followed. Each repetition sent a fresh wave of cognitive dissonance through the assembled minds. It was an act of power so far beyond their understanding that it defied classification. It was not violence, it was control. It was not destruction, it was editing. The humans had not just demonstrated a new weapon, they had demonstrated a mastery over the fundamental grammar of reality. The SIL, the cybernetic logicians, were in a state of near-system collapse, their processors caught in endless loops trying to reconcile the sensor data with the known laws of the universe. The Lumini, ever sensitive to the emotional and philosophical currents of the cosmos, felt as though they had just witnessed a divine act, and it had left them trembling with a mixture of awe and terror. But it was the Xylos warlords who were most deeply affected. Their entire culture was built upon a foundation of martial prowess, technological superiority, and the righteous application of force. They had watched one of their most powerful warships be neutered, its greatest defense unwritten from existence without a sound, without a single casualty. It was an act of utter, absolute humiliation. Warlord Kor's avatar was present, but it was diminished, the usual boisterous rage replaced by a dark, brooding stillness. His invulnerable fleet had been proven to be as fragile as glass, and his entire worldview had been fractured along with it. High Counselor Thrax let the recording play a final time before silencing it with a gesture. The image of the indomitable froze, a dark shape against the nebula's glow. It no longer looked primitive or insignificant. It now looked like a harbinger, a messenger from a reality they had not known existed. Ontological recalibration? Thrax's thoughts resonated, the words heavy with the weight of their implications. The SIL have analyzed this term. Their closest approximation is the targeted removal of an object's truth. The humans did not destroy the shield generator. They simply made it for a time untrue. The energy, the matter, the complex physics that comprised it were instructed to be elsewhere, or to have never been at all. He paused, letting the sheer impossibility of that concept settle into the minds of the conclave. For centuries, we have defined power by the ability to destroy, to shatter worlds, to extinguish suns. We have built our empire on the principle of overwhelming force. The humans, they have chosen a different path. They have defined power as the ability to persuade. They have learned to persuade reality itself. The Lumini matriarch's thought stream was a soft, sorrowful whisper. We were so arrogant. We saw their simple ships and their chaotic energy signatures, and we judged them as children playing with fire. But we were the children. We were the ones playing with simple, brute force toys, while they were learning the secret language of creation. For the first time, a SIL representative spoke with a tone that bordered on something other than pure logic. There was a hint of static in its synthesized voice, a trace of the system's shock it was experiencing. Our models are insufficient. Our understanding of physics is incomplete. The energy required to perform such an act, even on a localized scale, would exceed that of a supernova. Yet, our sensors detected no significant energy release. None. This is not technology as we understand it. It is something else. A new science, or an old one we have long forgotten. It is control, Warlord Kor's thought rumbled, surprising everyone. The rage was gone, replaced by a grim, chastened respect. Absolute control. They could have unwoven our ships from existence. They could have made our crews untrue. But they did not. They chose the shield generator. the most powerful symbol of our perceived advantage. It was not an attack. It was a lesson, the most terrifyingly elegant lesson in the history of warfare. Into the profound silence of the chamber, a new communication arrived. A calm, polite request from the human exploration vessel Indomitable. Captain Eva Rostova wished to address the hegemony conclave. She did not ask for their location. The message simply arrived, bypassing layers of psychic and technological security as if they were not there. It was another casual demonstration of their unnerving capabilities. Thrax felt a tremor of something he had not felt in millennia, apprehension, but he knew this was the pivotal moment. To refuse would be to choose fear and ignorance. The hegemony had to understand. He had to understand. He accepted the connection. In the center of the chamber, the hologram of the Indomitable was replaced by the image of a human female. She was Ted in a simple chair, in a room that was stark and functional. She wore a plain, dark uniform, devoid of rank insignia or ceremonial decoration. Her face was calm, her expression serene. She was not old, but her eyes held a depth, a quiet gravity that seemed to resonate with the ages. This was Captain Eva Rostova. She did not look like a conqueror. She looked like a philosopher. "High Counselor Thrax, members of the conclave," she said, her voice a calm, even tone, perfectly translated into their myriad forms of communication. "I thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I apologize for the unorthodox nature of our recent demonstration. It was not our desire to cause alarm, but it was necessary to ensure that our intentions were understood without the potential for misinterpretation that often accompanies first contact." Thrax focused his will, his thought stream projecting into the chamber. "Your demonstration has rendered our most advanced military theories obsolete, Captain. You have shown us that we are children with spears, standing before a master of the elements. What are your intentions? Why are you here, at the edge of our space, with such power at your command?" Captain Rostova nodded slowly, her gaze seeming to meet each delegate's directly. "We are here because we have no other choice. The power we have demonstrated is not something we celebrate. It is a burden, High Counselor. A terrible, necessary burden, developed out of a history of profound suffering." She gestured, and the holographic space around her shifted. It showed images from human history, not their triumphs but their failures. It showed their wars, fought with crude gunpowder weapons, then with atomic fire that consumed cities in moments. It showed their world, scarred by industry, its climate collapsing. It showed images of famine, of plague, of self-inflicted wounds born of tribalism and fear. The emotional weight of the images was staggering. The conclave, whose own histories were filled with glorious conquests and honorable battles, watched in horrified silence at this catalogue of self-destruction. "We are a species that nearly extinguished itself," Rostova said, her voice quiet but firm. "We learned the art of destruction all too well. We held the power to unmake our own world in our hands, and we nearly used it. That terrible crucible was our defining lesson. It taught us that the ultimate power is not the ability to destroy your enemy, but the ability to render destruction itself obsolete. It forced us to mature, to look beyond our own petty conflicts and see the larger truth." "And what is that truth?" the Lumini matriarch whispered, her psychic presence laced with sorrow for the history she was witnessing. "That life is the universe's most precious and improbable creation," Rostova answered. "That consciousness is a treasure beyond all measure, and that the greatest responsibility of a sentient species is not to conquer the cosmos, but to safeguard it. Our weapon is not a weapon at all. It is a tool of de-escalation, a way to enforce peace without violence. It cannot kill. It cannot cause pain. It can only disarm. It can only say, 'Stop, there will be no war today.'" The chamber was silent. The sheer ethical weight of her words was as overwhelming as the power she commanded. The hegemony had never considered such a philosophy. Their concept of peace was one enforced by the threat of annihilation. The humans had found a different way, a better way. "You speak of safeguarding the cosmos," Thrax said, his mind reeling. "But you are a young race. You have only just begun to explore the stars. What threat could you possibly perceive that would necessitate the development of such reality-altering technology?" Captain Rostova's serene expression finally broke, replaced by a look of profound, solemn gravity. The air in the chamber seemed to grow colder, heavier. This was the true purpose of her communication. The demonstration, the history lesson, it was all prelude. "Because something is coming," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that resonated with terrifying certainty. "We have not been expanding blindly. We have not been seeking territory or resources. We have been running, and we have been searching." The hologram around her changed again. It was no longer Earth's troubled past. It was the deep, cold void of intergalactic space. And in that void was a signal. It was not a communication. It was more like a trace. A faint, residual echo left in the fabric of spacetime. The Sill's analytical minds immediately focused on it, parsing its impossible structure. It was a signal of immense age, far older than the hegemony, older than any known civilization. And it carried with it a terrifying signature. Our ancestors detected the first hints of this signal centuries ago with their most primitive radio telescopes, Rostova explained. It was a ghost, a whisper, but as our technology grew, we began to understand. What it is not the signal of a civilization. It is the wake, the gravitational and psychic echo left behind by something that moves between the galaxies. The image zoomed in, resolving into a terrifying pattern. The signal showed the slow, systematic consumption of galactic energy. It depicted entire galaxies, over millions of years, having their light dimmed. Not extinguished in violence, but slowly, methodically, and completely drained, like a battery being depleted. "We do not know what it is," Rostova continued, her voice heavy. "A fleet? A single vast entity? A natural cosmic phenomenon? We do not know, we call it only the silence, because that is what it leaves behind. It consumes everything. Light, matter, energy, thought. It is the ultimate entropy, a force of cosmic nullification, and it has turned its attention to our galaxy." The full, horrifying weight of the revelation descended upon the conclave. Their squabbles over territory, their pride, their military doctrines, it all seemed like the bickering of infants in the shadow of a tidal wave. This was the great twist, the truth that dwarfed their petty conflicts. Humanity's strange benevolence, their relentless but peaceful expansion, their terrifying yet non-lethal technology, it was all part of a desperate, galaxy-spanning survival strategy. They were not seeking to challenge the hegemony, they were seeking allies. "The magnetar pulsation event at the nebula," Rostova said, "it was not just a scientific curiosity, it was a focusing lens. For a brief moment, it amplified the echo of the silence, allowing our instruments to get a clear reading of its trajectory and speed. It is faster than we thought. It will reach the outer arms of our galaxy not in millennia, but in centuries." High Counselor Thrax looked at the data streaming from the human captain, his ancient mind finally grasping the full, terrifying scope of the puzzle. The humans were not a threat. They were a warning. Their technology was not for conquest. It was for unity. It was a tool to stop the squabbling children from killing each other before the real monster arrived. "You developed this power to unite the galaxy?" Thrax asked, a sense of profound awe dawning in his thoughts. "We developed it to force a conversation," Rostova corrected gently. "To create a moment of peace long enough for the different races of this galaxy to listen, to look up from their borders and their battles, and to see the great, silent darkness that is coming for us all. We did not know if you would be peaceful or hostile. We only knew that we had to get your attention. We had to make you listen." The chamber was still, the weight of ages replaced by the weight of a future that was suddenly uncertain and terrifyingly shared. Thrax looked at the calm human in the hologram, and he saw not a young, upstart species, but an ancient soul, one forged in the fires of near extinction and gifted with a terrible, prescient wisdom. They had seen the end of all things, and they had devoted their entire existence to trying to prevent it. He turned his gaze from the human captain to the assembled delegates of his mighty empire. He saw the fear in the Lumini, the shattered pride in the Xylos, the frantic recalculations of the Sill. Their world had been turned upside down. Their upper hand was a memory, but in its place was something new, something fragile, terrifying, but undeniably present, a shared purpose. "Captain Rostova," Thrax said, his voice resonating with a new authority, not of an emperor addressing a subject, but of an equal speaking to a peer. "You have our attention. You have made us listen. Now, tell us what we must do." In the silent heart of the hegemony, a new age was dawning. The conflict was over before it began, and a new, far greater one was just beginning. The lone human warship had fired its single, silent shot, and in doing so, it had not started a war, but had perhaps given a divided galaxy its only chance to survive one. The future was no longer about dominance, it was about unity. And humanity, the strange, contradictory, terrifyingly powerful newcomers, had just appointed themselves the galaxy's reluctant, burdened shepherds. The great, silent darkness was coming, but for the first time, the galaxy would not face it alone.